we're in an era right now where building things is actually the easiest it's ever been. And so just because you built it first doesn't mean there aren't 10 more people coming right behind you that maybe have better distribution to get to the target customers they're trying to reach.
What was the moment that shifted for you to where I'm building this in order to do this one day?
Felt like I'm going to go do this because I'm going to learn from it. That seemed like a fair trade for me. Of all the things you could be doing in this world, why are you doing this?
Welcome to another episode of the Deal Flow Show podcast. Today we have a very special one. I'm extremely interested with some time that I spent in a kind of fintech company. So this conversation is going to be sick. We have Carey Ransom, who runs BankTech Ventures, but also Operate, which a mentor to a lot of technology entrepreneurs. Carey, I'd love to hear a quick 2 minutes on who it is that you are, what it is that you do, and who it is that you help, because it'd be way better than anything I'll come up with.
Well, thanks for having me, Ivan and DJ. It's great to be here. I guess the quick story on me, I would say first and foremost, I consider myself an entrepreneur. That started at a young age. I grew up in a family business. I started trying to figure out ways to start things and make money from a young age, and it's kind of stuck with me. I'm a student of business. I love businesses, business models, and change. And I got into technology. I started tinkering around with software when I was a kid and eventually made my way into software businesses because I think those are some of the most interesting businesses of at least my time. And that has led me down this fun journey of doing a whole bunch of startups. And I've literally had every job imaginable within those companies over their lifespans. And then I decided to try to help others do that. And that first started with Operate, which we started about 5 years ago and have co-founded or been the first investor or early hands and feet in now more than 24 companies. And we've got several really, really cool founders that we're helping build their life stream and business and seeing them dent the universe in all their unique ways. And then about 4 years ago, helped start BankTech Ventures, which is really our effort to try to help the thousands of community banks around the country to navigate the digital transformation and change that each of them is undertaking to try to remain independent and relevant and able to serve the various communities that they serve around the country. And through that, we help identify the next generation of emerging technologies that make banks better. And that could be from security to efficiency to new relevant or interesting digital experiences or products that they can offer to their customer segments. And so, as you might imagine, I have a lot of really fun conversations and partners and founders that I get to interact with every day and just feel so blessed to be able to do that.
Yeah, we're going through the Operate podcast that you got over 100 episodes and you're talking to a lot of fintech founders. What is the number one thing you see that when they come to you, whether it's a limiting belief or something that they're not quite understanding with all your experience, what is something that you, I guess, work on correcting and mentoring them through?
Yeah, I think still there's a notion. I mean, I say all the time, people love their products. As founders, we love what we built, pride of ownership. And I tend to try to orient people more toward love the problems and love the customers. And far too often, it's easier to sit in your office building than getting out and really working side by side with the people that you're trying to help to understand what they really need, what they really want. And are you focusing your time and attention around the right things? Are you solving the problems that they really are motivated and interested and willing to pay for having solved? Or are you solving something that's just not that interesting and compelling to them? And therefore, You could have the prettiest, most interesting solution or product out there, and you're looking for a problem to solve. You actually haven't identified the right one. And so I think shifting that mindset is often hard because we're in an era right now where building things is actually the easiest it's ever been. And so just because you built it, and even because you built it first, doesn't mean there aren't 10 more people coming right behind you that maybe have better instincts or better support, or frankly, in this era, better distribution to get to the target customers they're trying to reach. And so I think that we built it, so therefore we should be okay is probably one of the biggest impediments I often run into in some of those early conversations.
Yeah. I mean, I just had a conversation today with someone and he's building up his own software. He doesn't have a ton of coding experience, but I mean, with all the AI coders and everything that's out there now, he's working on building something right now. And you're right. Like it is so easy to spin up something nowadays, or simple, put it that way.
Yeah.
And probably not easy.
It's not easy, but but why? I mean, I'll ask people often, of all the things you could be doing in this world, why are you doing this? Why are you building this? Why now? And I think the people that resist building it until it's just so obvious it has to be built, people are begging them to solve this problem, is usually an indicator that you're on the right track earlier than somebody who built it because they could and wanted to. And they may or may not have oriented around the right problem to work on.
On the operate side, how early stage are these ideas coming to you? Like, it sounds like you work with a lot of early stage startups. Are they literally at the idea stage?
We've had
Where
ones,
are they at?
yeah, we've had ones at that early of stage, and it varies. You know, one of the things that I was totally comfortable with when we started Operate, because I've been at the concept stage and the napkin sketch stage and the prototype stage, is I kind of said nothing is too early, and we'll engage with people when we meet them. And what we're comfortable with is getting involved with founders that we can love. And lovability is sort of our definition of they're passionate about what they're doing for some crazy reason. They're doing something that we feel like they've got a unique ability to be successful in that area. They're collaborative and coachable, and they learn really, really rapidly because they're so excited about it. Those are all, to me, the traits of a lovable founder. And so ones that we can love, and we feel like we can also get excited about the space that they're trying to operate in. And if you look at all the different companies that we're involved with, it runs a wild array of different industries and types of businesses and business models, because I can generally get excited about a lot of different things. So if I can love them and I can get excited about what they're doing, and then feel like we can add some value in some way that we can tangibly see. It could be access to talent, it could be access to customers, it could be just general operating help and advice that they may need to just mature as a business builder, and that they're open and want that. And we feel like those personality interactions will be really positive. Those are a lot of what get us comfortable to say, we feel like we can maybe help them de-risk this from what's generally going to be a 90% likelihood of failure. If we can get it to 50, that's moving things in a very positive direction, that they're going to have a better chance of maybe just making it. And so that's really been for us the model. And our involvement, what we do, how much we own, all of those things are varied. We don't look at it as this is a factory where we're manufacturing out startups or companies. I just don't think that way. I think more in that every startup is a snowflake. Each one has unique properties to it because of all the confluence of the people, the opportunity, the timing, etc. let's think of it as this very creative endeavor, and our contribution into that is going to be different for each one, and that's okay. And so far, that's worked. And, there are probably ones that I wish I owned more of than I do. There are probably ones that maybe I wish I owned less of than I do. And it's part of the learning journey that we're having and the adventure of being around founders who are trying to go change the world in some small way that they're involved in.
For sure. What's super interesting with that is, uh, so just this week we've talked to two guys in private equity. So Deal Flow Show, anyone that deals with deals, which is anywhere from VC, family offices, private equity, and I see the similarities in the sense of the lovability factor. One guy told me, kind of off camera, he's like, I just look for guys I could see myself having a cup of coffee with every week. But then it's so different because they look at risk so differently. And I almost feel like your philosophy would give them gray hair.
I mean, you have to put aside, yeah, it's like somebody gives me at this early stages, somebody gives me a financial model, and I kind of go like, I don't even necessarily need to see it because I may be asking questions like, how do you even think people are going to pay for this? Or do we even have an idea of what the business model of this might be? And how are we going to go test and figure out, is the customer going to pay for this directly? Is somebody else going to pay for it on their behalf? Is this going to be monetized in some novel new way that we've never seen before? I don't know. And so you have to sort of think about the value being created and then how it's going to be consumed and potentially paid for. And so you have to have some amount of the art of the possible openness to say, well, what could this look like if it actually worked? And do we even know what that is going to be? Or is this just a space that's having some amount of disruption availability in it? And we just need to be in the middle of that and figure out where the best opportunities might be.
I guess for me, why did you decide the more VC route versus the private equity route? Is it
They like to be in that early creation. I've worked across businesses. I started in a 100-year-old family business, and then I worked in a 100-year-old consumer products company, and then I worked in some relatively early stage software companies. And what I realized is I like creating and creating things that are really new and maybe don't have as much precedent to them is just more fulfilling for me. And so then being around that, I find to be more fun and interesting than the optimization. I'm, pretty well educated and I have a pretty good math brain and understand optimization. It just doesn't, going from 0 to 1 is more fun and interesting to me than going from 1 to 10 or from 10 to 100. And there are people that love to do those things. They like to have the canvas fairly well boundaried, and then they get to make it a lot more sensible and optimized within that. And the people that know that and are really good at that, I'll typically hire them to come take my job so I can go work on something else. So I think it's just self-actualization, figuring out, where you really like to go. I worked in a private equity firm one summer, and I really liked the guys that I was working with. They all were ex-investment bankers. They all had pretty much the same training, and they really looked at the world through spreadsheets. And I would look at deals from how I would potentially optimize that business strategically if I were running it. That wasn't just about changing the financial structure of the business, that there were a lot of other ways to create value, potentially product line extensions or buying vertical adjacencies or other ways to add value. And that's just more of a builder operator way to think about doing that than the just financial way. And neither is better or worse. They're just different. And in some cases, they're very complementary.
I'd love to expand on like that. Obviously, you've had so much experience with multiple startups of your own, and then through the venture studio, just that 0 to 1 process and that process of developing and getting product market fit. Do you have a framework that you kind of take your founders through, or are you thinking about it completely different based on, the nuances of that particular business?
Yeah, I think it's the latter, if I'm being honest, that I don't have a hardened there are plenty of books out there and plenty of frameworks and processes that exist, and I'm sure some of them are really good. I tend to like let's just start in the stream. Let's get in the pool and let's start swimming and let's react to the things that we're seeing as we're in there. And that to me is a part of just rolling up the sleeves, having a bias to act, and acting will get the learnings that then you can continue to iterate from. And so I find it to be a, high contact sport that you've got to be in there really doing it to have a chance to uncover what that opportunity may look like. And so to me, there are obviously some key things, and I shared some of them earlier, like resisting the temptation to build. I mean, I have found founders that they just keep building and building and building, hoping that eventually what they build, and they just keep, is this it? Is this it? As opposed to really focusing on the end ideal customer or the ideal problem that you can uncover and say, that is something somebody really is unhappy about. It's really important to them. There's a framework called jobs to be done. I like that because that focuses on the steps in a job, and that's where you can uncover key problems as opportunity areas. And it doesn't get to the solution. It gets to, this is something people are really motivated to have better and are unhappy about. And it's important. Okay, now let's think about the best ways to potentially solve it, because there could be many. And I think resisting building until you have something worth building for, that is probably the closest thing to a process that I tend to lean on repeatedly. Now, that doesn't work if you're inventing some totally new thing, but most of our world is improved through incrementality, really, if we're being honest about it. It's, a faster, better, cheaper it's not a totally breakthrough new thing.
What you just said about increasing, it's not like it's some insanely revolutionary thing, because just this past week I saw 3 softwares that all do the same thing, or they're all doing the same thing and maybe they have a tweak to it, all, the AI powered and everything. And what's super interesting to me is how you're, I'd love for you to expand on it, but it seems like you're building the ability to have that first contact pretty quickly for a founder that you're going into support. Is that kind of what you're doing with BankTech? Is that kind of an idea of what you're doing there? Can you kind of go into
Yeah,
that?
the way I think about BankTech is we we've created what I would call the ideal strategic, from the founder's perspective, the ideal strategic investor. Because in the ideal strategic investor sense, they have interest not only from, I could be a good validator of your solution, that you're on the right track as far as the opportunity that you're trying to create, that as a customer, I can see value from this, and we have financial alignment to the future. You could get that from a single investor who's in the industry or in the market you're trying to serve. The challenge you can run into is it's one perspective. In our case, we have over 100 banks. We're trying to create a synthesized perspective from them, which gives not only a broader set of potential customers, it really gives a total industry perspective. And so you get that, which is huge from validation and just a bigger go-to-market opportunity set to work with that you don't get from one. You really get the broad industry perspective while not having the sense that if I have this one strategic as an investor, then their biggest competitors are probably not going to work with me. And that's a risk at an early stage. So we look at what we try to build is really useful to our banks because they are getting access to companies that they most likely are never going to meet or understand on their own because they're too busy doing what they do. And they tend to be the smaller market banks, not the city banks of the world. And so they see the value in having this R&D and innovation team as an extension of theirs out there working on their behalf, which is what we do. And for founders, we really can give them a industry perspective on here's what banks are thinking about, what they're interested in, not interested in right now. And so as we think about it, we really don't need to take product risk. So if I'm not sure if this works yet, as the founder says it does, I can just say, if you want to work with us, you need to actually put this in front of our banks or maybe even pilot it in a couple of our banks to just prove that the product actually works as advertised. And we've done that many, many times. And sometimes that's great and it works out fine. Sometimes it shows that they're not quite ready for prime time. And it's just a part of our process. And if they believe enough in what they're doing, we're unique enough as a partner that we can ask them to go through that. And if they don't see the value in doing that, then they're probably just not the right founder for us to work with. So that's on the price side. And then on the market side, similarly, if we have questions about will our banks really consider this a high enough priority to act and work with them, we'll just put these companies in front of a whole group of our banks and say, hear from them. Are they telling you a value story that will motivate you to do something? And if they don't really feel compelled that they would prioritize this, that gives us a tremendous amount of signal on how quickly this company is likely to get adopted in the marketplace. And so as just a way to evaluate opportunities and pick the ones that are likely to be successful, it gives us, frankly, an unfair advantage. And so our companies that we end up working with, they do well because we've already pretty much determined that what they do works and banks are interested in solving this problem. And
Yeah, it's like solving the what do I even build, like what you said.
It's like you're like, hey, you're bringing a founder instant distribution and validation for any idea. So you're de-risking yourself on one side because if you're going to invest in this idea, you already know whether they're basically, or you're able to get feedback really quickly on whether that could have product market fit. That's incredible.
So it's not as risky as it sounds to the untrained ear.
that's right. Yes. And frankly, that is applying, I would say, some private equity like principles to the de-risking of it. And frankly, we have to do that because our banks are thinking about these as not investment opportunities, but as potential partners, vendors to their bank. And they want confidence in being able to work with these companies. And so we have to have that confidence. If we don't make a really diligent decision and the company doesn't work well with them, now we lose trust and it breaks the machine that we've built. And so we take a lot of care and are very discerning. I mean, we've met 5,000 companies since we started 4 years ago. We've made 24 investments. So, we keep track of almost all of those companies because in some cases, a bank may ask us and say, hey, have you seen a company that can do this. And so that's a resource, and that's part of our value to our banks, is just to be eyes and ears in the market. And just because we didn't invest doesn't mean it's not a useful solution. We just don't necessarily believe it's going to be big enough or broad enough, or the deal wasn't right for us to actually make the investment.
Yeah, that's so interesting because when we were looking into bank tech, we were looking at what it is that you're doing, and then the moment we started drawing the line between the two, it was like this light bulb moment. And then on top of that, you're having the podcast in which you're talking to guys in fintechs, you're establishing the presence there. I what's also very interesting to me, because for me, brand building, content, all this other stuff, which is my background. But what was super interesting to me, which I think people would learn from you, which I think is phenomenal, is there's like a two-sided coin in terms of the brand that you're building. This bank tech speaks clearly to the community banks that you're talking to. It's clearly communicates to them what it is that you do and how you can help them. And then operate clearly. I mean, the operate that is a founder's language. That is what they do. How did you? I guess how did you come to that solution in terms? I got to build two different brands. I got to do two different things in order.
Well, they happen
to make it
sequentially. Yeah. I mean, Operate and BankTech are actually like my right hand and left hand, and they're not connected. I'm really the only connected piece of that. And so we have some similar capabilities within BankTech. So we have partner, for example, that runs an accelerator program for early stage bank enabling technology companies. And we partner with them. We invest in companies that come out of there. In some cases, in many cases, we'll introduce companies to them. And it's another way for us to get that market and product validation and signal that we need. There may be a company I meet through the banking and bank enabling technology world that we're never going to do something with the bank tech, or it's too early or something like that. And my partner and I at Operate may say, hey, we'll take you under our wing over here, but we really haven't done that much. Operate to me has kind of been my playground for entrepreneurial activities. I might meet a really interesting entrepreneur or founder who wants to go start something, and we just start kicking around some ideas. My partner and I started a company within Operate a couple of years ago. He's now running it, and we brought in a third co-founder to help him. And I'm the chairman of the company, but my involvement is much, much less than theirs on a day-to-day basis. And that was us after almost 4 years of having this studio, finally saying, you know what, we have our own idea. We're looking around. There's nobody better to actually start this than us. Let's start it ourselves, and we'll go run it for at least for now. And if we find somebody better to bring in at a point, we will. And we brought in a co-founder to make sure we had the right capability in place. And that's a company that's really taken off, and it is another sort of appendage off of this. But the way I think about Operate and BankTech is just really they're two separate ways for me to continue to stay relevant in company building and how technology continues to influence and change the way businesses are built. And in some cases there are crossovers, but it's pretty rare and it's not deliberate.
Sorry, I clicked over, but that's so interesting.
Yeah, I think it makes me better in all, having, because in the really early stages, you're meeting the people pushing the edge of the envelope in a number of how they do business. It's like the really scrappy early stage entrepreneur is going to be more your hacker type that's trying to figure out how do I'm not going to probably go spend $1 million on Facebook ads day one. I'm going to go try to do some things to get $1 million of value in a way that I don't have to pay for. And that's where I just think a lot of creativity happens there that often can be used across other types of businesses as well.
Yeah, and it gives you this very unique vantage point. It's like there's 2 valleys here, 2 villages, if you will, in these valleys, and you're just happen to be on the mountain that can kinda see on either end. That's so
Well, I live part-time in both. It's my winter home and my summer home.
that's so cool. That is so cool. What is why did you even pick banking? Why did you decide that, uh, smaller community banks are the ones to go after?
So I didn't pick it. It was already kind of beginning, and I some of my partners who started it needed somebody to come in and be that complement to them. I have two partners that run banks, and I knew both of them. I liked them a lot. They had identified that they and their brethren across the country were in need of help, and that COVID had accelerated the transformation of digital in banking by probably 5 years, because the people that had been resisting making these technology investments all of a sudden were operating banks in places where they had to close their branches because they were told to. And they had to figure out, how do we still support our customers through mobile phones and other means that they'd not had to contemplate previously. And so all of a sudden it was, oh, this is a world now, everybody has seen it. We need to continue to invest in that. And they were busy running their banks, but they saw the opportunity. My other partner is an advocacy organization for community banks, and they are trying to help these banks. They're working with them in Washington, D.C. on policy, but they're also really trying to help them with education and understanding. And they saw the need as well. And so they came together, and then they said, well, we need somebody that can really run this as a operating entity, manage the fund, manage the investment process, go out and meet the founders. And so I just happen to have a very complementary skill set to theirs. My last two startups were in fintech, so I had a pretty good understanding of the innovation side of what was happening in financial services. And then it just so happened my family's been involved in a community bank for 100 years. And so I have a pretty good understanding of community banking. My dad just retired as chairman of the board of a small bank that we've been involved with in my hometown in Indiana. And so I knew the face of the type of folks that we were going to be working with and supporting. And frankly, it pulled at my heartstrings. I wanted to help him and people like him around the country that are servant hearts to their communities. These are really the pillars of their respective communities all over the country that have helped put people in business, help them grow their businesses, help them buy their homes. Banks are a key part of the financial foundation of our country. And these community banks are often in places where no other bank exists and has brought capital to the edge of the communities and of our economy. And it's a unique structure that we have here versus anywhere else in the world. And it's a key feature of our financial system. And they've, in many cases, been left to figure it out themselves and are not advantaged by the way the regulatory and market environment has been. And so we said we need to do some collective effort to try to help as many of them as we can. And so that was the motivator for me. And it's been wild fun and so fulfilling. And I think there is a great dual value opportunity as well to help these founders that want to help banks and to help the banks make better, more confident decisions themselves. And so far that's borne out and been true. And everyone has done well as a result of that.
Yeah, what you said about the fact that your dad has worked with it, like chairman of the board for a community bank, it's so interesting because normally, you know, I guess you do a pulse check on how people feel about banks and the connotation people have around the banking industry as a whole. It's not the best, but it's because they're thinking about the big guys, the very large institutional banks, and it's so interesting to hear how you are kind of, well, it's not just them. There's these smaller banks that actually provide real value, and they're not these massive corporate entities that are.
Not even close. I mean, these are people that they proudly put their cell phone on their business card and are on their website and say, if you have a problem, you call me as the president of the bank. And they will take that call and they will figure it out. And that is a part of who they are. And that is, I think, easy to get excited to want to help.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you're in this position in which you're the mentor, right? You're the mentor helping founders and guiding them, and but one thing that always fascinates me is who the mentor's mentor is. Where's the, because we're all a big, I guess, accumulation is the word of all of our sources of information. Where did you learn all of this from? Where did you get that entrepreneurial spirit? Where did you Where do you get your training data? Which is a funny conversation that I had with the AI guy earlier, but where does that come from? Who mentors you? Who guides you?
I mean, I am a student of the world, and I'm curious about virtually everything to at least have a cursory understanding of it. I drove my parents crazy when I was a kid because it was always question, question. I think on one of my bios, I say, I feel like most of what I learned about business, I learned from my family business, growing up with my dad and my grandfather and working for them. Uh, but I feel like I am constantly being mentored by my children, by the founders that I get to work with. I feel like anyone can teach me something, and I don't consider myself an expert in anything, but I have a bias to do things. I'm willing to do, and I realize for me, a lot of what I've learned in life is through experience. And, it's the mistakes I've made. I try not to make the same mistake multiple times, but I have a tendency to try. And through that, I've learned a lot. And I've certainly had people that have been generous with their time and taught me things. But like I said, I feel like the way the world is evolving, how quickly it is, I learn as much from a young founder as I'm likely to learn from somebody who's retired and many, many years ahead of me.
Yeah. DJ, I know you have a question, but I just wanted to say this is like, I watched an interview with Kobe. Um, and he said when you find your obsession, it's almost as if the world becomes your library. So it's interesting. It's kind of the same philosophy you got with business. You're just so obsessed with it that it's just, you're finding books and sources of info from everywhere. That's so cool.
That's right.
DJ.
And the access to that information is the greatest it's ever been.
Yeah, my question was similar. It was just more so like I would love to kind of rewind the clock and dive into, obviously now you're standing at the top of the mountain where you're looking over the villages and you have this unique perspective and you've exited a few companies. You now have, you work with early stage startups, you have these banking relationships, and you have just a very vast array of knowledge. Walk me through kind of like, those early stage startups that you ran. What was it like on the true operator side where you're bootstrapping a business? And what are some lessons that you would like to give back to that guy when he was starting out that you've learned, over this time?
Yeah, I think one of them probably is just reminding me it's going to be okay. I think, my stress level in those days, I was more volatile, more stressed, and just urgent. And I think that, just keep doing everything you can today. Don't not sleep all night, and you're going to be better tomorrow. Just knowing you put in a great day, and there's never going to be a shortage of things to do. And at times you have to just do all you can do today, but keep yourself in a position where you can do as much again tomorrow. And that, life is a marathon, and along that there are a series of sprints, but you can't sprint all the time. And that I think that advice, I started to learn that as I became a parent. And I feel like that's probably the greatest job and greatest gift that I've had. But I think that's probably the advice. And one of the things that because I'm so curious, I just naturally had this, which was I was never going to be the bottleneck for progress and growth. And what I quickly learned, as I mentioned earlier, is if I could find great people to take on parts of my job, that freed me up to then go take on the new sets of problems or take the next hill that maybe nobody else was ready or capable of going to climb. And so I very quickly in my startups became a really good recruiter, because I found that if I could get better and better people in, it just freed me up to go work on things I could get more excited or interested in that often no one had yet thought about or tackled. And again, it was easier to go be the first to go there and try to get it started than to keep optimizing. It just didn't fulfill me to keep optimizing something that already seemed like it was underway. I needed to find the person that could go optimize it way better than I ever could and was fulfilled from that. And I don't know. I think I learned that through maybe being a bottleneck early on and going, that doesn't make any sense. I don't want to be stuck in this job because I'm just stuck here. I need to think about, and I think that idea of pulling myself out of the work for a minute to look at it and say, okay, how else could I get this done or have somebody else do it so that I could be freed? And I find that that's often an impediment, that many of us get stuck in that cycle and can't get out of it because we're so stuck in the doing it day in, day out.
Right. I love both of those. Like even the first point about just kind of zooming out and having that. I think that having these conversations on this podcast with older folks, and not that you're old, but
I'm old.
just people who've been in the game, people who've been in the game
I'm
for
a
a really
youthful
long time.
spirit, but I'm old.
Who've been in the game for a long time are seasoned. I'll call it seasoned. It really gives you this perspective, because I think as like a younger entrepreneur, it's really easy to just, like you said, just have that urgency and that constant feel like today you need to accomplish everything, your entire vision in a day, versus having kind of like that, realizing that, business is a 50-year game, 60-year game in some cases, and zooming out like that's been a really good perspective for me recently. And hearing you say that's been cool.
Yeah. I to kind of build on that too, it's with your second point, which was the one that hit me, is the recruiting piece, which is finding not being the bottleneck. I know for a fact I've struggled with that. But it's also something that, people that are listening, I mean, that's something they got to get at really good too. Because if you're going to build a business or buy a business and acquire it, it's not like you're going to be in there operating everything. I uh, I love to learn from you. Is there a checklist that you follow? I guess 1, 2, 3 when it comes to recruiting? Because I know with recruiting, especially early on, you might feel like, well, why would someone want to come work for me? Why might someone want, what qualifications do I have to do so? Well, I'm sure you've probably battled with those limiting beliefs, and you work with founders who battle with those as well.
Well, I've been on both sides. I think when I get to be the one who creates the environment and the culture, I have some fairly strong views on that. I mean, the first is I don't ever believe that somebody works for me. I feel like they're making an active choice to work with me. And so my view is if I'm the leader of the group, I need to really inspire and excite you to want to continue to make that active choice to be here and bring your whole self and do your best work here. And if that starts to change, I need to either recognize that there's something I'm doing that's causing that change, or this person is making an active choice to go do something else and take their time and talents elsewhere. And that ideally, that should never be a surprise. That should be an ongoing dialogue that's happening all the time. I want them to feel comfortable, assuming they're doing great work. I want them to feel comfortable that they can bring that conversation all the time. So I'm not a big believer in annual reviews and things, because it should be an always going dialogue as part of it. And there shouldn't be in the ideal case, there should not be surprises and on either. And so if somebody decides it's time for them to go to their next season of life elsewhere, we should be doing that, and both in agreement of this is a great decision for you because it's in the best interest of what you need to do for you. And that I think has worked pretty well. And so as a result, I've had pretty good success of people's willingness to continue to have a great relationship and potentially even rejoin or regroup in future phases of life. So I've had a number of people that I've been able to work with many, many times. And so that's a key part of it for me. And then the other is, I think about, you asked about checklist. The number one trait that I tend to hire for is curiosity. So I definitely have a type. And particularly when I'm in organizations, which is where I live most of my life, is in organizations that are really not precedented, right? They don't have a long history. They're going to evolve pretty quickly, scaling from a handful of people to tens of people to hundreds of people. You're breaking and rebuilding things over and over and over all the time. And you need people that are comfortable with things in pencil, and that's going to get erased, rewritten, etc. And curiosity to me is the number one trait there, because then they're constantly thinking about, okay, how might we do this better? How might we do this at 10 times our size? What will need to change? And it breeds curiosity to me breeds a humility, because it reminds you how little that you actually know. And that curious person, they tend to be humble. They tend to be really open to doing work. And so to me, as a first trait, that's where they tend to be very adaptable, because they recognize that they're going to learn through that adaptation, and that curiosity feeds them an energy. And so that's definitely my number one. Not every role in every case needs that, but in startups, when I've been hiring, that has been the primary trait that I've found to be a good predictor of people that can continue to go and scale as the organization does.
I love that. I have a follow-up question so you said curiosity is kind of like a core trait. And I think that goes against what I've heard a lot of people talk about is, oh, you have to hire for experience. Like, you never want to hire someone who is not experienced in the role. And then I've heard the other side of the coin where people are almost, I think in a startup environment, there's almost some nuance to that, because like you said, when you're hiring for curiosity in a rapidly changing environment, then like you said, that person becomes adaptable. And I think that's a bit counterintuitive to like some other, advice that I've heard from people on hiring and recruiting, where it's all like, hey, you just want to go with the person who's proven in that role. But I'm assuming like I said, it's a nuanced, startup environment where it's so rapidly changing that curiosity is, key. And it's almost better to almost hire for potential rather than, I'd love your take on that. And
I think the earlier the startup is, the more potential you have to hire for, because you need extreme adaptability. I call them startup athletes, that you need that multiplayer or multi-tool player at those early stages that can adapt. And you may think they're going to spend a bunch of their time on marketing, and all of a sudden you realize this is not how we're going to actually go to market or how we're going to build. I may need you to go sell instead of market. I may need you to go be the face to the customer and support them, or do something else. So at the earliest stages, it's so uncertain that you need those highly adaptable athletes. As the business matures, you have much more certainty, that's when you start to get into much more optimization. Then you have much higher role clarity. When you have higher role clarity, you can hire people that have a much more discrete and clearer sense of experience. And they may be able to come in with that experience and implement a lot of what they had previously done to make things better and more optimized. And so it really depends on where you are in that journey. I call it from complete uncertainty on the quest for complete certainty. And on that journey, you need different types. But I do find in many cases, you'll see people that can't identify that, and they may hire for experience too early, and those folks aren't adaptable. Or they may hire somebody too inexperienced later, and they waste a lot of time and cycles because they haven't seen this before, and they have to learn before they can add a ton of value. And so I think that is the nuance that you talk about.
Yeah, I think that's some of the best like recruiting or just the most tactical and most clear picture of it. Cause it's like you're looking at it from a perspective of where are we at in the company. And like you said, if you don't have a clearly defined role, how can you hire for someone who's experienced in that role? If, like you said, the role could change tomorrow. So I think that was an absolute masterclass on, how to think about it in different stages.
Like a million percent. When you said it's so crazy that you said humility because I was having a conversation the other day and it was, um, the it's almost by picking curiosity or solving for the root traits of the character required for someone to actually succeed in a startup, which is a whole lot of faith. And if you play out the actions that faith ends up, I guess, manifesting itself into, because faith is like this woo-wah word that, what the heck does that even mean? But then you extrapolate, I guess, expand on it, and what are the actual activities required in order to, I guess, show that you have faith? It is having the humility to ask questions, even though it isn't entirely clear on how it might play out. It is this role may not be here tomorrow, but I'm still gonna do this job, and uh, even if it's not something I love, I'm gonna do it as if I love it. It's so the fact that you picked curiosity is so big. Like I'm gonna use that all the time now because that solves for all of the root traits of the humility, the open mindedness, um the figuring out ability of everything.
Yeah, the other way I describe a lot of the people that I love to bring in early stage is I call them FIOs, and they're figure it outers. And they kind of come, they might identify a problem, but they not are just saying, hey, this is a problem over here. They're already in the hole trying to figure out how to fill it in some way. And ideally they come to me in the perfect sense, they come to me, they go, we found this problem, we figured it out, we're good. And it just, the full cycle, and it just reinforces, that's why you're here, because not only can you identify, but you can actually fix it too.
It's like I have a million questions. I don't know which one to ask. But no, yeah. With I guess so. What is all of this moving towards? You got the left arm. I don't know which one you consider the left arm, the right arm with BankTech and Operate, but you've got the left arm, the right arm. You're doing both. You got the playground, but also the more structured, I guess, investment fund, if you will. Um, what is all this going to? What are you building
life.
towards? What is the
I'm having an adventure. I gave up on this idea of like a structured goal framework for my life a long, long time ago. I've been so blessed. I'm the furthest thing from complacent. And so I just try to be present and do the work that I can do every day, and just feel so privileged to be able to do that I get to have fascinating conversations, and I get to work next to brilliant people, and they allow me to be part of it. And so I don't know where it's headed. We sort of evaluate the opportunities that come to us as they come, and I'll just keep going for as long as I can, I think.
I love that. It's like it's that cliche of the man who loves walking, if you really enjoy what you're doing, then that's really the end goal. And it is what allows you to play those longer games and think long term. I love that.
The true love of the game.
Yeah, I laugh. I spend a fair bit of time on LinkedIn, and I've been on there for a long time. I had an assistant that just checked the other day, and it was like 22 years or something that I've been on there. And
Wow.
I've been active on there, and it's been one of the most fulfilling small parts of how I spend my time, because I have seen people grow up and have incredible careers on there. And I have relationships that are solely exist on LinkedIn, and I do it all. I haven't hired people to do it, and I engage and comment. I've had people ask me who does it, and it's like, it's me. It's an outlet for me to engage with people in that world. I get to do it in others as well. And so I don't have a goal for that. It's part of living this professional life where I get to learn and engage and hopefully add value to people in various ways along the journey. And it's been, yeah, amazing fun. And I just hope it continues.
That's and that perspective. If you were, and I'm sure you can probably remember at a moment where it didn't make sense. Because I know, and maybe you see it a lot with younger founders as well, to where it doesn't make sense yet until it clicks, I guess. What was that moment? Because you're building something towards something. There's always a reason for why you're doing something. All these, gurus or whatever, they talk about doing it for the why of it. What's that end goal? What's that end target? I guess what was the moment that shifted for you to where I'm building this in order to do this one day, in order so this happens, to just
I think for me, it was pretty early in my career, where I felt like I'm going to go do this because I'm going to learn from it. And that is enough. And if I can contribute enough value that I can continue to learn, that seemed like a fair trade for me. And so most of my subsequent adventures that I've gone on, and it's been a whole bunch of them, has been, as I've often described it, as 50% jobs or 50% opportunities, where I was sort of qualified for 50% of what it was based on what I had done previously. And the other 50% was all the new things I was going to get to experience and learn. And that was why I was excited to go do it. But the other 50% was what got me in the door. And so that has kind of been the whole series. BankTech would be just the latest version of that I was probably qualified for 50% of what I was signing up for. And that is what got me the opportunity. And the part that really excited me has been the 50% that I've gotten to learn through doing that. And I was willing to do the 50% of what I've done before to be able to experience the other half that was brave new adventure and opportunity for me. And so that's probably been the realization of that's possible.
Yeah, man, that resonates a lot, and that it's just learning. Just it is an adventure. Like, you are just meeting people, and it, today has been an awesome conversation.
That's why we started the show, man, to learn.
Well, I'm not sure if I taught you anything, but super fun conversation, and yeah, enjoyed the opportunity to hang out with you guys for a bit.
No, yeah, you definitely taught us a lot. Carey, you mentioned LinkedIn, obviously 22 years. I didn't realize it'd been around that long. But Carey, where can people find you? Who are you looking for? Who do you want to connect with? Uh, Floor is yours.
I'm pretty easy to find. There aren't a lot of people named Carey Ransom in the world, lucky for me. So I'm pretty easy to track down on the internet, on LinkedIn, X, are probably the places where I hang out the most. And yeah, I love talking to community banks. I love talking to founders who are trying to help banks in some way. And I like to talk to really early founders that are trying to change the world in any number of ways. It could be some of my most recent Operate investments are far outside of banking in areas as varied as education or robotics or even biotech. And so I'll always love meeting really compelling people that are trying to dent the universe.
Awesome. Carey Ransom, ladies and gentlemen, and that's another episode of the Deal Flow Show.